Good evening, you are watching FOE News, Friend of Earth is an environmental consulting association. Our goal is to inform and encourage countries to learn on climate issues and patterns. Today, we will be discussing in Japan's climate change and its strategies. I'm Steven, and this is Bree. We are coming at you with the latest and the greatest news from around the world.
As we all know, climate change is real and is affecting our world in more ways than we think.
Yes, it has become a known fact that the cause of climate change is a constant, gradual increase in the Earth's temperature.
We can thank our anti-eco-friendly lifestyles for that one. We have failed to recognize the dangers of our actions and technology to our environment, and the Earth is beginning to show it.
It's countries like the US, China, Russia, and Japan that are biggest threats to our atmosphere and continue to contribute to carbon emission levels.
The climate change is affecting the crop growth and causing sea levels to rise, which increase the risk of flooding around coastlines. Did you know that by 2020, we will need 50% more energy, 40% more water, and 35% more food?
Whoa, no, I didn't know that. In fact, in Japan, the vulnerable populations are suffering from disease, malnutrition, and dehydration due to the effect of climate change. Those vulnerable populations are represented by pregnant mothers, the elderly, and citizens in poverty.
With that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce Prime Minister of Japan.
Welcome to FOE and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So we know that Japan is one of the biggest contributors to global warming and has been impacted greatly by the climate change now. Can you give us a brief overview of Japan's history and how over time it became a high carbon country?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so originally the Japanese, they weren't allowed to trade with other countries. So Emperor Tokugawa Iemitsu forbid foreigners from entering Japan and these Japanese citizens from leaving Japan. And so since trade was limited and technology wasn't developed yet, Japan's gas emissions were very low.
So how did Japan become one of the greatest carbon economies in the world?
So this was before the Industrial Revolution. Around the 19th century, after the Industrial Revolution, the Japanese established a trading system. They had railroads and steam engines, but were still behind the Western country in World War I. Over time, they caught up with the technologies of the rest of the world and became more and more dependent as time went on.
What were some of the ways that Japan first contributed to climate change?
So these Japanese citizens used to build their castles, armies, and monuments solely out of wood, and since we all know where wood comes from, that means less trees and more things built.
Okay, but how does this contribute to climate change?
So as time went on, more and more trees were being used, and at that rate that the trees were being used, there was no way to produce that many trees to account for the ones that were being cut down. So that's called deforestation. There's a huge possibility that deforestation means larger amounts of greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere and increased speed and severity of global warming.
What are some current dangers of climate change in Japan?
Air pollution. One of our many focuses right now is finding ways to develop new environmental energy, resources to reduce the amount of carbon emissions in the air. We're working to become a low-carbon economy to provide better lifestyles for the vulnerable populations.
Okay. Talking about so many negative side of the climate change, do you think it can have some positive impact for Japan?
Oh, definitely. I mean, with the heat increase in the rice yields in some parts of Japan, like especially northern parts of Japan, the rice yields are going to increase. And with some of the unusual rainfall, that can help with the droughts. And then also with that unusual rainfall, we can store it for later for other places in Japan.
Okay, that's interesting. Is there anything you are doing to transform into a low carbon economy? Yeah,
I mean, we're definitely encouraging like recycling and turning off lights and stuff when they're not in use. And I mean, there's several other ways that Japan can become a low-carbon economy.
Okay, that's great. In fact, isn't Japan involved in several global organizations to support climate control?
Yeah, we're actually a proud participator and investor in the Green Climate Fund.
Whoa, what is the Green Climate Fund?
So the Green Climate Fund is an organization that provides financial support to developing countries working to better their climate control.
How neat. Are any other organizations Japan is involved in?
Yeah, we're actually involved in a couple others. We host the Innovation for Cool Forum, which provides a foundation for leaders and policymakers to come and discuss these climate change matters. We also promote the Joint Crediting Mechanism, which allows the use of improved low-carbon technologies in developing countries.
Gosh, seems like Japan's taking climate change really serious.
Oh yeah, we definitely are. Rather people want to admit it or not, our carelessness now will affect future generations, and that means our kids' kids, and so on.
And what about UNFCCC and Kyoto? What is your political platform on that?
Japan's committed to support the principles of the UNFCCC, but only insofar as other countries do. Japan would like to set itself as an example to other countries in devoting itself to the improvement and control of climate change. And as for Kyoto, we haven't renewed our emissions since 2012.
Oh, why is that?
The Kyoto followed procedures that Japan didn't agree with. We decided that Kyoto just wasn't appropriate for the measures, and we wanted to take a change.
Interesting. Well, we had some of our news team go out and personally interview Japanese citizens and get their insight on some of the things we discussed. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm here with Hibiki Himasuki. Please tell us your stand on Japan's role in climate change and your recommendations for how Japan can better regulate their climate control.
Well, I'm extremely passionate about climate control, and I find it very devastating how people do so little to help the environment.
Yes, I agree.
And I also think that Japan should focus on reducing the amount of coal-powered factories. It's polluting the air and hurting young children and those who are expecting. Japan should also focus on coming up with better technology for iron and steel industries.
How do you think this will help Japan's economy?
Well, it would decrease the amount of carbon in the environment, which could lead to less air pollution and less airborne diseases.
It is said that due to climate change, we need 50% more energy, 40% more water, and 35% more food. How do you feel about this?
I think it's outrageous because
It could have been prevented?
It could have been prevented all along, and if people were aware of the damages that climate change was causing, then it easily could have been prevented.
Agree. Prime Minister, what's your view on
Well,
this?
I agree with you, Hibiki, that this could have been prevented, but that in reality, climate change wasn't brought to everyone's awareness until this previous century. The only thing that we can do is work on preventing any further damages and hope that the actions we are taking now are the ones that ultimately benefit not just Japan, but society as a whole.
Do you think Habiki's recommendation is something that you can take consideration?
Well, actually, it's funny because Hibiki's recommendations are very similar to the additions we are making to our climate control policy. What stood out to me was how citizens can see how climate change is affecting the Japanese society, and it's something that we can keep in mind and bring back to our board.
Excellent. Thank you, Prime Minister, for coming today. And Bree and Stephen will get back to you really soon.
Seems like Japan is heading to the right direction.
Yes, other countries should follow in their footsteps.
You know, I really feel like I learned quite a bit today from the Prime Minister. I have no idea Japan was such a large factor in global climate change.
Yes, learning about Japan's ancient traditions and ways of life really enlightened me.
And also their involvement in so many climate regulating organizations. How many were there? 3?
No, 4. There are just so many vulnerable populations in Japan, and it's great that they are taking the right steps to make Japan a better and safer living environment.
Well, I didn't realize that Japan's climate has so many vulnerability along with opportunities.
And Hibiki's recommendations were great. She was well informed on her country's standing with climate change. It's great to see that the Prime Minister thought her recommendations were valid.
Well, next we have a tuner. Our special guest will be Professor Nobuo Melmuma from Ibaraki University, and we will discuss about her recent report about Japanese climate change.
All right, thank you for coming, Professor. Let's cut directly to our topic today. So your reports indicate that climate change has already made an impact on Japan. What are those indicators?
Yes, well, in Japan there has been a lot of talk about the impacts of climate change. If I summarize it, one impact we can see is on the ecosystems, and another area where we can see significant impacts is in agriculture. An example of this, where we can see ecosystem change, is the alpine zone, where plants are gradually moving up in the mountains. We can see this happening in many places. Also, the snow cover on Mountain Fuji cannot be seen in the area where it used to be. It is gradually moving higher up the changes in the sea level are also very, very big. A 1 degree of Celsius for temperature rise for marine species is the same as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius increase for us. So it is said that the environmental change in the sea is very big. One obvious impact in agriculture is on rice production in Kyushu. 80% of their total production was considered first-rate 10 years ago, but this has declined dramatically. The temperature is now too high in the growing season, and this affects the inside of rice and lowers the quality. So farmers have changed the time of planting or changed this kind of rice.
Okay, so from now on, climate change could have a bigger effect on Japan, and in your report you mentioned 3 scenarios for the future. Can you tell us more about them?
Yeah, I actually have my report right here. So in the first scenario, the world takes no action. The second scenario, the world takes drastic measures to global warming, and in this scenario, we stabilize CO2 in the atmosphere at 450 ppm. And in the last scenario, the world takes moderate measures. If no action is taken by the end of the 21st century, the average temperature in Japan will rise like 3.7 degrees Celsius. So if we take these dramatic measures, the temperature would be 2.1 degrees Celsius higher. And with moderate measures, it would be about 2.7 degrees Celsius rise. But we're glad to see that in the Paris Agreement, UNFCCC aims to make the rise in temperature below 2 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it'd be better for the nations to work together against global warming. Also in your report, it concluded that this climate change damage could cost Japan 17 trillion per year by the end of the century. That's a big number, so bearing that in mind, which areas did your analysis show were the most vulnerable?
The biggest impact will relate to natural disasters, especially water-related disasters. The 17 trillion yen is based on the scenario that we won't do anything about our CO2 emission. In this case, the annual damage from flooding will be 8 trillion yen more than now. Landslides related to damage will be 1 trillion yen more. Storm surges when the sea overflow onto land when we have typhoons. If we expect typhoons, they will be strong and the damage will be 7 trillion yen more. The area of beach trees would become smaller and we'd lose sandy beaches, or many people will possibly die from heat stroke. And all of these will be added up to 17 trillion yen.
Okay, wow. Okay, so you had mentioned that the agriculture in Kyushu is already severely affected by climate change. So what does that mean for the rest of Japanese agriculture?
Well, agriculture is an industry that depends on nature, of course. So the range of plants is dependent on climate, and if the climate change progresses, so as the climate wars, the temperature zone will shift north in Japan, and at present, good rice comes from the northern Japan. And in the future, other northern parts could become the biggest rice producer. And likewise, areas in the south will have difficulty producing rice. So we're expecting these kinds of changes. And the same things could happen to fruits and vegetables. So if you try to estimate agricultural damage, then you have to look at each product individually. And our research is not at that level quite yet, but we do have a good sense of the overall picture.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this does conclude our interview with the professors, so we thank you for coming out today. And back to you, Bree and Steven in the studio.
Thanks for interviewing with us, Nabu Amira.
Yes, I think now I have a better informed about the climate impact and its future implementation in Japan.
There are also economic effects that I had no idea were such a huge threat to Japan.
Especially the agriculture, like what happened in future for Japan in its north part and southern part.
Next we have Griffin with today's weather forecast for Japan.
Hey folks, it's Griffin bringing you Tokyo's weather here today. Looks like we got 80-degree Fahrenheit weather out there, 72-mile-an-hour winds. Looking pretty rainy. Oh, sounds like we are getting a live feed from Chloe out in the field. So let's take this out in the field, Chloe. What do you got for us?
Thank you, Griffin. I really can hear you from outside. Actually, there's a heavy shower outside right now, and the storm is really heavy. I'm not making sure that you guys can hear me right now. And actually, there's like a child over in the water right now.
Oh, looks like we lost Chloe, but I am hearing that we have some live footage of the storm in our helicopter.
Audio Jungle.
Second day that Japan has been pounded by these storms. Now, you can see helicopters rescuing people, or attempting to, from rooftops, from anywhere they can get. Now, this torrential downpour also caused a leak at the Fukushima nuclear plant that had been closed down since 2011, when that massive earthquake and tsunami struck Japan. As you can see here, these floods are very reminiscent to those tsunami waters. Now, all this water has overwhelmed the drainage pumps at the site of the contaminated water treatment facility, given as a statement by TEPCO. Look at these guys. I mean, they're heroes, risking their life out there near the power lines. I mean, this is unbelievable footage.
Oh wait, Justin again? One of our viewers sent us a live footage video of the storm from their home. Let's take a look.
Ah, 車が堤防を越えました今。船も堤防を越えるかもしれない。
Well, that wraps up our topics for today.
And next time we will be invite our special guest, the President of the United States.
Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye.